Generals banned his illegal alcohol mod, until gave his P-47 a 500 MPH boost. Part 1. The JUG'S Deadly Limit. By the winter of 1943, the sky over Nazi-occupied Europe had become a slaughterhouse. For the young American pilots of the 8th Air Force, every mission was a roll of the dice with death. They were flying into a wall of German steel, and their primary protector was a massive 7-ton beast known as the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. To the men who flew it, the Thunderbolt was simply called the JUG. It was the biggest, heaviest, and most rugged single-engine fighter ever built. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't pretty. It was a flying fortress packed into a fighter's frame. It was armed with 850 caliber machine guns that could shred a locomotive, and it was armored like a tank. If you got hit by a German 20mm cannon, the JUG would just swallow the explosion and keep on coming. But the JUG had a dark secret, a flaw that was costing American lives every single day: the weight of the beast. While the P-47 was the king of high altitude, down low, near the deck, it was a different story. The plane was simply too heavy. At 20,000 feet, its massive turbo supercharger made it a monster. But during takeoff or low-level dogfights, it accelerated like a freight train, meaning it took forever to get moving. The German Luftwaffe pilots knew this. They flew the Messerschmitt 109 and the Focke-Wulf 190 Nimble, lightweight hunters that could outclimb and outsprint the heavy American Thunderbolt. American pilots found themselves in a terrifying trap. If a German fighter dived on them from the sun, the JUG couldn't jump away. It couldn't claw for altitude fast enough. Pilots would slam the throttle forward, begging for speed, but the engine would only groan under the massive weight. Many of America's best young aces were being picked off simply because their planes were too slow to react. The heat of the problem. The heart of the Thunderbolt was the Pratt & Whitney ART-2800 double WASP engine. It was a masterpiece of engineering, capable of 2,000 horsepower. But the mechanics on the ground knew the engine was being held back. The problem was heat. When a pilot pushed the engine to its maximum limit, the temperature inside the cylinders soared to dangerous levels. If they pushed it any further, the fuel would begin to explode prematurely, a phenomenon called detonation. Detonation was a death sentence. It would melt pistons, shatter valves, and turn a 2,000 horsepower engine into a useless hunk of scrap metal in seconds. To prevent this, the military installed limiters on the engines. They were designed to keep the pilots safe from their own machines. But for the men in the cockpit, those safety limits felt like a betrayal. They didn't want a safe engine. They wanted an engine that could outrun the enemy. The underground revolution in the cold, muddy hangars of East Anglia, grease-stained mechanics and desperate pilots began to whisper about a solution. They had heard rumors from the factory engineers about something called a D1 anti-detonant injection. The theory was simple but dangerous. If you sprayed a fine mist of water and alcohol directly into the engine's intake, it would act like a massive internal refrigerator. The water would absorb the extreme heat, and the alcohol would provide an extra kick of high-octane fuel. This liquid gold would allow the pilot to push the turbocharger pressure far beyond the factory limits, unleashing an extra 500 or even 600 horsepower in an instant. It was like giving the JUG a shot of adrenaline straight to the heart. The generals say no, but when the idea reached the high-ranking generals at the Pentagon and the Allied command, the answer was a thunderous nitrogen monoxide. The brass was terrified of the risk. They saw the P-47 as a valuable government asset. They believed that injecting a mixture of water and industrial alcohol, basically high-proof moonshine, into a high-precision military engine was an act of pure madness. It will corrode the cylinders, they argued. It will cause engine fires, they warned. They officially banned any unauthorized modifications. They threatened mechanics with court-martial and pilots with grounded wings if they dared to tinker with the official designs. The generals wanted a war fought by the book. But the men on the front lines knew that the book was being written in the blood of pilots who were too slow to survive. The first illegal drop, the order was clear, but the desperation was greater. In secret, under the cover of darkness, mechanics began to liberate stainless steel tanks from old trucks. They borrowed high-pressure pumps and copper tubing. They began to build the first illegal alcohol injection systems. They hid the tanks behind armor plating and ran the lines where no inspector would look. They weren't just building a mod. They were building a rebellion. One pilot, a man with ice in his veins and a target on his back, volunteered to be the first to test the Forbidden's fire. He knew that if he crashed, he'd be a disgrace. If he succeeded, he'd be a legend. He lined up on the runway, the heavy scent of high-proof alcohol wafting through the cockpit. He shoved the throttle forward, reached for the secret switch, and prepared to find out if his engine would explode, or if he would finally become the fastest thing in the sky. The era of the Super Jug was about to begin, and the Luftwaffe had no idea what was coming for them. Part 2, The Forbidden's Fire. While the top brass at the Pentagon were busy, signing safety memos and looking at polished spreadsheets, a revolution was being built in the shadows. In a drafty, corrugated metal hangar somewhere in the rain-soaked countryside of England, a group of grease monkeys were committing an act of high-stakes military treason. They knew the general's ban on engine modifications was more than just a rule to the pilots in the sky. It was a death sentence. Without more speed, the P-47 Thunderbolt was a massive 7-ton target. These mechanics weren't interested in playing by the book. They were interested in bringing their boys home alive. Under the dim glow of flashlights, they began installing what they called the Lifesaver Kit, the Moonshine Machine. The system didn't look like a piece of high-tech military hardware. It looked like something a bootlegger would build in the backwoods of Kentucky. It consisted of a crude, hand-welded steel tank, a series of copper tubes scavenged from broken trucks, and a hydraulic pump borrowed from the spare parts bin. But the magic was what was inside that tank, a volatile 50-50 mix of distilled water and industrial-grade methanol alcohol. In the world of high-performance racing, this was the ultimate cheat code. Methanol didn't just cool the engine. It acted like a chemical supercharger. It allowed the fuel to burn with a violent surgical precision that the engine was never supposed to handle. The mechanics worked in absolute silence. They hid the lines behind the main instrument panels and painted the tanks matte black, so they would blend into the shadows of the fuselage. If an inspector walked in, they'd just see a crew doing routine maintenance. But in reality, they were preparing to turn a tractor into a rocket ship. Breaking the lead wire gate to activate this secret power, the pilots had to do something they were strictly forbidden from doing in training. On the throttle quadrant of the P-47, there was a thin lead wire seal. This seal blocked a gate called War Emergency Power. It was the brake in case of death switch. Moving the throttle past that wire meant the pilot was pushing the engine to 110% of its rated capacity. Normally, pushing past that wire would cause the engine to melt into a puddle of aluminum in less than 60 seconds. But with the illegal alcohol lines connected, that gate to hell was now a shortcut to godlike speed. The ghost run on a foggy morning 50 miles north of London, a single P-47 rolled out onto the runway. The man in the cockpit was a daring test pilot who had seen too many empty chairs at the mess hall. He was tired of being slower than the Germans. He roared down the runway, climbed to 20,000 feet, and leveled off. Below him, on the observation deck, stood a group of skeptical generals and nervous engineers. They were holding stopwatches and binoculars, expecting a standard performance review. They were about to get a heart attack instead. As the plane reached its cruising speed, the pilot took a deep breath. He slammed the throttle forward, snapping the lead wire seal with a distinct pop that he could feel in his palm. Simultaneously, he flipped the secret toggle switch to engage the alcohol injection. The sound of the Pratt & Whitney engine changed instantly. It shifted from a deep, rhythmic thrum to a high-pitched, screaming roar that sounded like 1,000 chainsaws. The manifold pressure needle buried itself past the red line. The pilot was slammed back into his seat as the JUG'S surged forward with a force that felt like a physical punch. The aircraft, which usually topped out at around 420 miles per hour, began to tear through the air. 450, 480, and then the needle touched the impossible, 500 miles per hour. As the Thunderbolt shrieked past the control tower, the shockwave was so powerful it shattered the glass in the windows and knocked the hats off the officers below. The ground crews recorded a speed that defied every law of aviation they knew. The general's silence on the observation deck, a 3-star general stood frozen. His face went from bright red with anger to ghost white with pure shock. He realized that the illegal machine he wanted to ban had just done something no other Allied plane could dream of. He turned to the head mechanic, who was standing there with oil under his fingernails and a defiant smirk on his face. "What in the hell did you just do to my airplane?" the general demanded. The mechanic didn't flinch. He just looked at the smoking plane on the runway and said, "Sir, I didn't do anything to your airplane. I just gave it a little taste of freedom and a whole lot of moonshine. The legal battle wasn't over, but the war on the ground had been won." The P-47 was no longer a slow-moving target. It was a 500-mile-per-hour predator, and the German Luftwaffe was about to find out that the Americans had just changed the rules of the game. Part 3. The Dogfight Revelation, January 1944. The air over the French countryside is a frozen battlefield, 25,000 feet above the ground. A flight of American B-17 bombers is limping back toward the English Channel, trailing black smoke. Their only protection? A handful of P-47 Thunderbolts, low on fuel and even lower on hope. Among the Americans is a young pilot we will call Buck. Buck is flying a Thunderbolt that has a secret hidden under its cowling, a forbidden tank of water and methanol, installed at midnight by a mechanic who didn't care about the rules. Suddenly, out of the glare of the winter sun, the nightmare arrives. It's a Focke-Wulf 190, the deadliest fighter in the German arsenal. At the controls is a Luftwaffe ace with 20 kills to his name. The German pilot doesn't fear the Thunderbolt. To him, the P-47 is just a flying milk jug, big, heavy, and easy to outrun. The German ace screams down, his cannons flashing. He shreds the tail of one of the American bombers and then banks away into a steep, high-speed climb. He's using the classic German tactic, boom and zoom. He hits hard, then uses his superior power-to-weight ratio to climb back into the safety of the clouds, where the heavy American planes cut and follow. But Buck isn't following the old script. Breaking the wire, Buck pulls his stick back, pointing the nose of his 7-ton jug toward the sky. The German pilot looks over his shoulder and laughs. He thinks the American is a fool. No Thunderbolt can catch a Focke-Wulf in a vertical climb, but Buck reaches down to his throttle. He feels the thin lead safety wire. With a sharp jerk of his wrist, he snaps it. He slams the throttle forward into the forbidden zone and flips the unlabeled toggle switch on his instrument panel. Inside the massive Pratt & Whitney engine, a miracle of chemistry occurs. The white-hot cylinders are hit with a freezing mist of water and methanol. The engine temperature, which was about to hit the red line, drops instantly. The air density inside the intake spikes. The engine doesn't just growl anymore. It roars with a violent, mechanical rage. The P-47 surges forward like it was shot out of a cannon. Buck is flattened into his seat as the extra 500 horsepower kicks in. The physics of panic, the German ace looks back again, and this time, the laugh dies in his throat. The massive American fighter isn't falling away. It's gaining. The 7-ton milk jug is defying the laws of gravity, clawing its way up the sky at a speed that shouldn't be possible for a propeller plane. The German pilot panics. He flattens his climb and tries to outrun the American in a straight sprint. He pushes his Focke-Wulf to the absolute limit, reaching 410 miles per hour. He thinks he's safe. Then, he hears it. A sound like a freight train screaming through the air. Buck's Thunderbolt isn't just closing the gap. It's vaporizing it. Flying at nearly 500 miles per hour at low altitude, the JUG has become a high-speed sledgehammer. The German ace watches in horror as the giant American plane fills his rearview mirror. Buck squeezes the trigger. 8 heavy machine guns erupt at once, sending a wall of lead into the German fighter. The Focke-Wulf's engine explodes, and the Butcher bird tumbles toward the French soil below. The Luftwaffe's ghost. That night, back at the Luftwaffe base, the surviving German pilots were in a state of shock. They sat in their mess hall, staring at their maps in silence. The rumors began to spread like wildfire. They spoke of a new American engine or a rocket-powered Thunderbolt. They couldn't understand how a plane that heavy could move that fast. The psychological advantage the Germans had held for years, the knowledge that they could always escape, was gone. Meanwhile, back in England, Buck landed his plane. His engine was covered in oil, and his illegal alcohol tank was empty. The mechanic who had installed the system met him on the runway. Buck climbed out of the cockpit, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline. He didn't say a word about the mission. He just looked at the mechanic, pointed to the empty tank and said, "Fill it up again. We're going back tomorrow." The general's ban was still on the books, but on the front lines the secret was out. The super JUG had arrived, and it was thirsty for more moonshine. Part 4. The Official Hero. By the spring of 1944, the secret of the alcohol-powered Thunderbolt could no longer be kept in the shadows. The evidence was raining down from the skies of Europe in the form of shattered German wings and terrified Luftwaffe reports. The American generals at the 8th Air Force Command were staring at a set of numbers that made no sense. Their pilots were returning from missions with impossible kill ratios. Their bombers were being escorted by Thunderbolts that seemed to appear out of nowhere, moving at speeds that the official manuals said were physically impossible. The brass had 2 choices: court-martial the mechanics for breaking the rules, or admit that the grease monkeys had outsmarted the Pentagon. The day the brass gave in, the turning point came during a high-level inspection at an airbase in East Anglia. A group of 3-star generals arrived to find out why their P-47s were suddenly outperforming everything in the sky. They expected to find a secret weapon from a laboratory. Instead, they found a master sergeant with oil on his face, holding a copper pipe and a jug of industrial methanol. The tension in the hangar was thick enough to cut with a knife. The generals looked at the illegal tanks, the makeshift pumps, and the broken lid wires on the throttles. For a moment, it looked like the outlaws were headed for prison. But then, one of the top fighter commanders stepped forward. He handed the general a combat report from the day before. It showed that a single flight of Thunderbolts, using the alcohol boost, had intercepted and destroyed a superior force of German interceptors without losing a single American life. The general looked at the report, then at the illegal engine mod, and then at the mechanic. He didn't order an arrest. Instead, he picked up a wrench, handed it back to the sergeant, and said, "How fast can you install this on every plane in my fleet?" The industrial tsunami, the ban was lifted. The illegal mod was officially designated as Water Injection Kit number 509. Almost overnight, the small-scale rebellion became a massive industrial tsunami. The factories in the United States began shipping thousands of official water methanol kits to every front of the war. What started as a hot rod experiment in a muddy hangar became the standard for every American fighter engine. The Super JUG was born. With 2,500 horsepower now available at the touch of a button, the P-47 became the ultimate predator. It wasn't just an escort anymore. It became a terrifying ground attack monster. Equipped with the alcohol boost, the Thunderbolt could dive at nearly 600 miles per hour, pull out of the dive, and climb back to safety before the enemy could even rotate their turrets. It destroyed thousands of German tanks, trains, and supply lines. The German soldiers on the ground learned to fear the whistling sound of the JUG'S, the fighter bombers that were too fast to hit and too tough to kill. The final verdict from the enemy. After the war, captured German aces were asked which American plane they feared the most. They didn't say the sleek P-51 Mustang. They said the P-47 Thunderbolt with the magic water. One German pilot remarked, "We thought we knew the limits of the American planes." But suddenly, the heavy ones started moving like spirits. You couldn't run from them, and you couldn't catch them. It was as if they had discovered a new law of physics. The legacy of the grease monkey, the story of the illegal alcohol mod, isn't just about engines and speed. It's a story about the American spirit of innovation. It is about the blue-collar genius of the mechanics who were unafraid to get their hands dirty to save their friends. The 500-mile-per-hour boost didn't just win dogfights. It proved that in a democracy, the best ideas don't always come from the top down. Sometimes they come from the bottom up, from the guys with the wrenches and the can-do attitude. The P-47 eventually retired to the history books, replaced by the jet age. But every modern fighter jet, from the F-15 to the 35, owes a debt to that first illegal spray of moonshine in 1943. Today, when you see a Thunderbolt at an air show, listen to the roar of that massive engine. That isn't just the sound of machinery, it's the echo of a rebellion. It's the sound of the Super Jug, the plane that was too heavy to fly, but too fast to die thanks to a little bit of water, a lot of alcohol, and the outlaw courage of the men who built it. The mission is complete. The engines are cooling. But the legend of the alcohol boost will live forever in the clouds. Part 5. The Radius of Innovation. The guns finally fell silent in 1945. The smoke cleared over the scorched fields of Europe, and the massive assembly lines that built the Super Jug began to slow down. Thousands of P-47 Thunderbolts were lined up on airfields, their engines cooling for the last time. But while the war was over, the revolution that started in a muddy hangar in England was only beginning. The illegal alcohol mod, the Forbidden's NCC tongue luck, didn't just win dogfights. It had cracked open a door to the future that would never be closed again. The bridge to the jet age. We often think of the transition from piston engines to jet engines as a sudden jump. But it wasn't. It was a bridge built on the back of the water methanol injection system. The early jet engines were primitive and dangerously hot. They struggled to produce enough thrust for takeoff, especially on hot days. The solution? The exact same technology the grease monkeys had used on the Jug. Engineers took the lessons learned from the P-47 and applied them to the first generation of American jet fighters like the F-86 Sabre. By spraying water and alcohol into the early jet turbines, they could provide that same 500-mile-per-hour boost for the jet age. Without the outlaw innovation of 1943, the United States might have been years behind in the race for the sound barrier. The illegal mod had become the foundation of modern aerospace engineering. The birth of the American hot rod. When the war ended, hundreds of thousands of mechanics came home to America. They were young, they had seen the impossible, and they had oil under their fingernails. They didn't want to go back to fixing slow, boring family cars. They brought the Super Jug spirit back to the streets of Southern California, the dry lake beds, and the backroads of the South. The same men who had secretly plumbed alcohol lines into a 7-ton fighter plane now did the same to old Ford V8 engines. They used the same water injection principles to win drag races and build the first muscle cars. The entire hot rod culture that defines American car history was born from the defiance of these mechanics. They proved that you could take a standard machine, break the rules, and make it go faster than anyone ever intended. The forbidden's fire of the P-47 lived on in the roar of the American V8. The grandfather of the Warthog in the world of the military, the P-47 Thunderbolt left behind a specific DNA that is still felt today. When the United States Air Force decided they needed a plane that was too tough to kill, too fast to catch, and could carry a massive amount of firepower. They looked back at the Jug. They saw the plane that could take 1,000 hits, carry 8 machine guns, and use an alcohol boost to escape any trap. The legendary A-10 Warthog, the most feared ground attack plane in history, is the direct spiritual descendant of the P-47. The pilots of the Warthog even called their plane the Thunderbolt II in honor of the heavy, rugged machine that used moonshine to change the course of World War II. The moral of the outlaw. As we look back at this incredible story, we are left with a final powerful truth about leadership and innovation. The generals wanted to ban the mod because they were afraid of risk. They were afraid of breaking the machine. But the mechanics and the pilots were afraid of losing their lives. The Super Jug teaches us that true progress often happens at the edges, among the people who actually use the tools, not the ones who write the manuals. It tells us that sometimes to save the mission, you have to break the wire. You have to push past the lead seal and find out what's truly possible. Today, the Thunderbolt is a ghost of the past. But every time you see a pilot reach for more power, every time a mechanic finds a way to make an engine do the impossible, and every time someone chooses a higher call over a rigid rule, the spirit of the Super Jug is there. It remains a symbol of the American spirit, raw, muscular, unapologetic, and fast as lightning. The lid wire is broken. The throttle is wide open. And the legacy of the outlaw mechanics is still screaming across the sky at 500 miles per hour. Part 6. The Final Verdict. In the final analysis of the air war over Europe, we often look at maps and kill counts. But history is truly hidden in the grease-stained logbooks of the men who never left the ground. As we close the book on the Super Jug, we have to look at the one thing the official military histories usually ignore: the soul of the machine itself. Why was it that the P-47 Thunderbolt could handle a massive, illegal injection of alcohol, while the sleek German fighters would have literally blown themselves apart? The overbuilt legend, the secret lay in the American philosophy of engineering. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 was not just an engine. It was a tank with a propeller. The American engineers who designed it, the Double Wasp, built it with a massive factor of safety. They used forged steel and heavy-duty alloys that were significantly thicker than what the Germans or Japanese could afford. The Double Wasp was like a professional heavyweight boxer who could take 100 punches and still stay standing. Because the engine was so overbuilt, it had a hidden, untapped potential. When those outlaw mechanics injected that 50-50 mix of water and methanol, they weren't just adding power, they were finally pushing the engine to do what it was secretly designed to do all along. The Super Jug didn't break because it was built to be unbreakable. The German mirror. On the other side of the fence, the Luftwaffe was watching in silent horror. Their engineers were brilliant, but they were trapped by a lack of resources. A German Messerschmitt engine was a precision instrument, built with exactly as much metal as it needed and not a gram more. If a German pilot had tried to hot rod his engine with an illegal alcohol boost like the Americans did, the cylinder heads would have cracked and the engine would have disintegrated in mid-air. The war wasn't just won by better pilots. It was won by the fact that the American machines were tough enough to handle the crazy ideas of their operators. The Super Jug was a physical manifestation of the American dream, a rugged, heavy-duty foundation that allowed for unlimited, high-speed freedom. The final secret of the lead wire. There's one more story that only the veterans tell. In the final months of the war, the lead wire on the throttle, the one the general spent so much time trying to protect, became a joke among the pilots. They started carrying small wire cutters in their flight suits. They would snap the wire before they even took off. They didn't want to wait for an emergency. They wanted the power of the Super Jug from the moment their wheels left the dirt. They realized that the emergency wasn't a specific moment in a dogfight. The emergency was the war itself. By taking the power into their own hands, they were taking responsibility for their own survival. The ghost in the hangar today, if you visit a quiet air museum at night, and you stand near one of the few remaining P-47s, you might see a small, faded stain on the side of the fuselage near the engine cowling. For the casual tourist, it's just old oil. But for those who know the history, that's a moonshine stain. It's the mark left by a midnight modification that changed history. It serves as a reminder that the greatest weapon in any conflict isn't the one manufactured in a government laboratory. It's the one created by the person in the field who refuses to lose. The generals wanted a perfect, predictable war. The mechanics gave them a fast, unpredictable victory. And in the end, that is the final verdict on the Super Jug. It wasn't just a plane. It was a rebellion that flew at 500 miles per hour. The final salute, as the last echoes of the radial engine fade away. We salute the men with the wrenches and the pilots with the lead wire cutters. They taught us that when the rules are holding you back from winning, you don't just follow the rules, you rewrite them in alcohol and fire. The sky is finally clear. The mission is truly over. But the spirit of the outlaw mechanic lives on in every person who dares to ask, how can I make this go faster? Farewell to the Jug. Long live the legend.